today we're going to go over our very first lesson for Foundations of Algebra. This is going to be the very first video of this series. I'm going to take you through the entire algebra course, and this is the first lesson. So let's go ahead and get started. This specific video is going to be 1.1, and the topic is variables and expressions. So the first thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is that we are going to be learning how to speak in mathematical language, right? Just like when you translate from Spanish to English, we are going to be keeping in mind that throughout this course, we're going to be translating English into math, right? Because a lot of these problems that you do or you come across in school or during tests, it has a lot of vocabulary, it has a lot of reading comprehension, and it's not necessarily just math problems anymore, right? There's a lot of words involved. So the first four main vocabulary that I want you guys to understand and learn and remember this for the rest of the course is sum, difference, product, and quotient. And some of these words you might have already heard. I'm just here to remind you what it means. So sum is addition. So whenever someone says, or whenever you read sum, I want you to think of addition. Difference, as you could probably guess, it's going to be subtraction. Product is multiplication. So the different multiplication symbols that you might see, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the times or the X. This can get confusing though as we progress in the course because this could be confused with the variable X. So I want you to get used to seeing a dot or even a star as multiplication, also parentheses. So if I'm going to do 5 times 8, right? Instead of using that X, I want you to think of it as 5 times X times 8 with a dot, or 5 star 8, or parentheses, like I mentioned, where it's 5 parentheses 8. Or you can even put a parentheses around the 5 as well. So all of these different ways are acceptable for notating the problem of 5 times 8. I just want you to be familiar with that. And then the last vocabulary that we're going to go over is quotient, and this means division or to divide. And of course, you know or might recognize this division sign. I'm going to use an example as well, just like below. But I also want you to associate quotient or division with a fraction as well, because fraction is a form of division. So for example, if you're going to do 8 divided by 2, I want you to be able to write it as 8 over 2 as a fraction as well. So these two both mean the same thing. All right, so I'm going to have 3 examples on the bottom. The first one is translate the sum of a number and 8. So again, the sum of a number and 8. So I know that sum means going to be plus. It says a number and 8. So 8 is going to be one of the numbers. And then the other number, we don't know it, right? So we can use the variable x. Example 2, translate 5 less than a number. So less than, when you think of less than, it's also talking about a difference or subtraction. So 5 less than a number. So you have a number, we don't know the number, and then we have 5 less than that, so you're going to subtract 5. And then our last example, you're going to translate the quotient of a number and 3. So quotient means, again, division or a fraction. So there's 2 ways that you could write it. You could say a number divided by 3, or you could do a fraction where it's x divided by 3 or x over 3. Both of these are acceptable to translate the quotient of a number and 3. All right, now I'm going to go over to these practice problems. So I'm going to go through these 3 practice problems, similar to the examples, but these are some problems that you might see for this specific lesson 1.1 for variables and expressions. So the first problem is write an algebraic expression for the product of 7 and a number increased by 2. So this one has multiple things involved. So you have a product of 7 and a number. So let's start off with that. So you have a product, so that's multiplication. I'm going to use a dot of 7 and a number. So we don't know this number. So I'm going to think x, or a variable x. I'm going to assign x to a number that we don't know. And then lastly, increased by 2. So this is addition. So this is plus 2. So I'm going to take this entire thing, because the product of 7 and a number is going to be plus 2. It's very important that I put parentheses, because that tells me it's just a good habit, right? Even though we follow what PEMDAS and multiplication does trump addition, so you would do multiplication before addition. I do want you to get into the habit of putting parentheses in there, because sometimes when we get different types of operations involved, the parentheses really make a difference. So 7 times x in parentheses, and then you're going to add 2. You're going to increase by 2. All right, question number 2. Write an algebraic expression for 10 less than twice a number. So again, twice the number, and then you're going to do 10 less than that. So this is subtraction, and this is multiplication, because 2 times a number, and the number is something we don't know. So it's going to be 2 times x, or 2x. And so another way that you could write this is to write times x, or 2 parentheses x. All of these mean the same thing, but in mathematical form, this is the most common. Whenever you have a variable involved, you can just write the 2 and the x next to each other whenever, again, you have a variable. So I'm going to do 2 times the number, and then I'm going to subtract 10, because it's 10 less than that. And you don't need to put parentheses here. Well, I guess you could, to practice, like I said earlier in the previous problem, to make it a habit of recognizing which operation to do first. But it is also implied, because this is multiplication, that you're going to do this multiplication first before you subtract the 10. Okay, the third example, it says write a verbal phrase for x over 4 minus 5. So this, I'm going to break it into 2 parts. So this, I could say a quotient of a number, because it's division, right? Quotient of a number and 4. But I'm going to put 5 less than. So 5 less than a quotient of a number and 4. So this is the x over 4 portion, and then this is the minus 5. So it makes sense to say 5 less than first, versus a quotient of a number and 4, then take away 5, right? It just flows better in English for you to say 5 less than a quotient of a number and 4. And that wraps up lesson 1.1. I'll see you guys in the next video.